Welcome back to Men and the City. In today's video, we are going to talk about the economy. Specifically, what is wrong with the economy. Now, even making such an assertion is a somewhat controversial point in today's day and age. There are legions of academicians, of economists, of policymakers, of government officials, etc., that will assert unequivocally that the United States and its economy are stronger and bigger and more dynamic than it's ever been. And some will say the global economy is as well. Well, why is it self-evident to many of us that this is not the case? Well, centuries ago, there was an interesting writer named Alexis de Tocqueville. Alexis de Tocqueville was commissioned by the King of France to come to the United States to study our prison system. But what he ended up doing was writing a very important book called Democracy in America. And what he discovered was that the United States had built an entirely new social economic structure. And what he says at the beginning of the book is interesting. He said, "What struck me the most about the United States was its equality of social conditions." Now, I would submit that if you or I or most people with our eyes open take a trip today to Chicago or Los Angeles or Seattle or even Washington, D.C., what we are not going to see is an equality of social conditions. What we are going to see is an inequality of social conditions. We're going to see tremendous luxuriant wealth on the one hand in certain zip codes and neighborhoods, and on the other hand, we're going to see sprawling tent cities, dilapidated buildings, and acute poverty. This is an important departure point to unravel this cognitive dissonance between economic theory as it stands today and what most of us as economic participants are experiencing in our everyday lives. Now, economic theory posits or defines itself as the management of scarce resources. And I actually like that definition, but I would amend it slightly. The purpose of an economy is to manage scarce human resources. It is not simply about energy or natural resources or landscape or private property and so forth. It is the management of human resources that is the key. And if you recall, in several videos, I have made this point again and again, that the economy is a human system fundamentally. It's not a robotic, mechanistic, empty, soulless machine. It is a human system, which is why economy or economics as a discipline is not really a science. It's more of a social science. Well, that brings us to what I think are the three key components that are wrong with the economy today. I call them the three F's: Fiat, Financialization, and Fungibility. Now, Fiat is the most known and discussed. Fiat is the Latin word for "let it be so." And essentially what it means is that instead of a unit of account or a moneyed system dependent or derived from some hard asset like gold or silver or something like oil or a commodity, instead of that, it is decided arbitrarily by a board of advisors or a central government or some kind of governmental authority. And the issue with that is that it decouples human productivity from economic value. Essentially, it creates an upside-down society in which all of the asset holders, whether it's through guile or not, some of it is inheritance, some of it is luck, whatever the case may be, but all of the asset holders are enriched over time. And they're enriched because more and more of this fiat is pumped into the system. There is no governor, there's no limit, there's no derivation that's restraining the amount of this currency. And as a result, more and more of it is pumped into the system, and it creates an upside-down society in which a very small number of people who own all the assets get extremely rich, and a massive pyramid of people at the bottom are more or less paying rent and furthering their enrichment. This system ultimately doesn't work, as most of us know. And that brings us to financialization. Now, financialization is the process by which companies use money to make money, right? And the issue here is that it divorces economic activity from productive activity. Rather than focus on expanding the business through plant and equipment by building new factories or hiring new staff. What companies do instead is financialize. They turn to stock buybacks or trading algorithms, and you see a massive expansion of the financial sector as a result of this process of using money to make money, financialization. And that conceals, it makes a lot of these economic structures look much bigger than they are. And of course, it's unsustainable because the financialized products ultimately must derive their value from something that's productive. And of course, over time, that relationship breaks down. The third issue is fungibility. And I think fungibility is the most egregious error. It's the most chronic problem that we deal with today. Because fungibility asserts that all human beings, all human capital, all labor is essentially the same. Now, economic theory today is based on something called rational choice theory. And rational choice theory makes exactly that case. It asserts that all human beings essentially respond to pros and cons, or carrots and sticks, or incentives and disincentives the same way. Of course, that is self-evidently false. There's an economic principle called Price's Law. And Price's Law, which is a very useful metric or a useful principle of evaluating the productivity of any economic system or any human system in and of itself, asserts the opposite. It basically says that if you take the population of the workforce of any company or corporate structure, let's say it's 100 people in a small company, if you take the square root of that 100-person staff, which gives you 10 people, those 10 people do about 50% of the work for that company. Well, that puts a lie to fungibility, which is what justifies open borders. It's what justifies the offshoring of manufacturing. It's what justifies our entire economic structure and educational system today, right? Our educational system pushes everybody through the same assembly line of training and vocation, and ultimately sends them into the same kinds of jobs. Well, that in and of itself doesn't work. And the good news is that the 3Fs system, this Fiat, financialization, and fungibility, is a self-correcting system. And the reason it is because ultimately over time, as this misallocation of human resources takes place, and more of the best and brightest are either pushed into the financialized economy or they simply are neglected altogether. Either way, because that human capital that we so desperately need and depend on is not being allocated to productive enterprises that we all need, whether it's in agriculture or energy or infrastructure or basic goods and services that we use every day. Because of that, the society and the economic structure begins to implode. And this is the point that we have arrived at today. And I'm going to talk more about that in future videos. So stay tuned for more, and we'll talk soon.